Just as the North Korean army was hurriedly trying to deploy their guards, a radio message came through the Chinese army's radio. It was an order to cross the river. China began invading North Korea. For some, it was the best of times. For others, the worst had begun. It was an era that brought the romance of exploration for some and the barbarity of invasion for others. Unfortunately, for our people, this era is remembered as a time that was not so beautiful. This isn't a Middle East conflict zone, it's Sinuiju, North Korea, where gunfire has been non-stop. China has long prepared for possible intervention in a sudden North Korea crisis. They spent over 2 trillion won on roads and restructured their military to intervene in North Korea. Right now, you can hear intense gunfire, and the Chinese troops making this noise are the 191st Combined Brigade of the 79th Group Army from the Northern Theater Command. China began restructuring its military starting in 2017. Similar to the United States Brigade Combat Team China has created and is operating a Brigade Combat Team system. These Chinese Brigade Combat Teams are called Combined Brigades. They are split into medium and medium-light types. They consist of 4 combat battalions and 1 each of reconnaissance, artillery, air defense, and 2 operational support battalions. Each combat battalion has 4 combat companies, plus 1 each for artillery, support, air defense, and reconnaissance, totaling 8 companies. The medium combined brigade, using the heavy character, has combat battalions of tank and mechanized infantry units. Each battalion includes 14 tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, plus an artillery and a support company. The medium combined brigade has 112 tanks, 112 infantry fighting vehicles, and 27 6-inch self-propelled howitzers. Its artillery unit includes 27 6-inch self-propelled howitzers, 6 multiple rocket launchers, and 6 anti-tank missile vehicles. It's nearly the same as the United States Armored Combat Brigade structure. And in the case of the Medium Combined Brigade, which uses the character medium in its name instead of having a tank company, it's made up of 4 mechanized infantry battalions equipped with wheeled armored vehicles like the Type 08 wheeled armored vehicle. The Light Combined Brigade has 4 motorized battalions equipped with 3 or 5-ton CT 181 or CSK 181 high mobility vehicles. The Combined Brigade in Sinuiju is a light unit, while another is stationed in Danzong. China sent the 191st Combined Brigade as the first vanguard because this light brigade has the highest mobility. They aim to quickly seize Pyongyang and replace the North Korean regime to favor China. The justification was to protect the lives and property of Chinese people in North Korea and to safeguard the Baekdu bloodline of North Korea. Here, North Korea's Baekdu bloodline referred to Kim Yo-jong, Kim Jong-un's younger sister, not his daughter Kim Ju-ae. Kim Yo-jong sought China's help, and soon Chinese troops arrived. Fierce gunfights were taking place around this Yalu River Railway Bridge. The Yalu River Railway Bridge has a railroad on one side and a single-lane road on the other. The North Korean 8th Corps set up barricades on this road to block the Chinese forces. However, with the North Korean army averaging less than 3 rounds of ammunition per person per year, it was impossible for them to defeat the Chinese army, which boasts the world's 2nd or 3rd strongest military power. They only managed to delay them for about 10 or 20 minutes. Meanwhile, the Chinese army's lack of capability was also a factor. This was expected since they hadn't fought major wars after the Sino-Vietnamese War. They didn't have a training system simulating real combat like the United States Korea or Israel. When the network suddenly failed, they couldn't cooperate and were isolated and defeated one by one. However, both Chinese and North Korean forces kept making repeated mistakes. It was nothing like the smooth, seamless military operations seen in war movies. First of all, there were barricades on the Yalu River Bridge, and a Chinese military company tried to enter. An engineer platoon was at the front here, and they were removing the obstacles. But the Chinese company didn't report detailed information about the enemy obstacles, their location, and size to their higher command. The scale and nature of the obstacles should have been reported immediately and coordinated with the higher unit. As a result, the Chinese company suffered heavy losses from the North Korean direct fire platoon. The engineer platoon also had to retreat. At that moment, a junior soldier from the North Korean 8th Corps witnessed the enemy retreating. For a brief moment, a sense of victory flashed in his eyes. The thought that the enemy was retreating flashed through his mind, and his heart, which had been pounding, seemed to stop for a moment. Beside him, Private Park Jun-woo remained confused, unable to believe what he saw. He was beginning to feel that this was truly a war with China, not just a border dispute. Kang Dae-yak saw this as the final battle and wondered if his comrade could last until the end. Park Jun-woo answered without hesitation, but at the end of his words, there was a longing that reminded him of his mother back home. It was at that moment. A faint mechanical sound came from above as the propeller's sharp noise grew louder. The two soldiers looked up together. Small shadows appeared dozens of meters above the ground, beyond their gaze. They were nimble, unmanned drones, and the two soldiers were the first to realize that these drones were not just simple reconnaissance equipment. Seconds later, the drone crashed from the sky like a fireball. In an instant, a deafening explosion tore through the air, sending dirt and debris flying in all directions, and the shockwave reverberated through the ground. Blood and dust filled the air between Kang Dae-yak and Park Jun-woo as Park Jun-woo, with his last strength, screamed his comrade's name in agony. The explosion quickly drowned out the scream. After assessing the situation, the Chinese forces used vehicles and an engineer platoon to suppress the North Korean troops with firepower. Supported by vehicles and infantry, the engineer platoon quickly removed the barricades and entered North Korean territory. This was when Chinese forces intervened fully, while North Korean troops repeatedly blundered. The North Korean troops tried to camouflage themselves using various bushes, but since the bushes were piled up on a bare mountain, it actually backfired. They stood out too much. There were even absurd cases where a whole North Korean company was wiped out, and Chinese forces also deployed troops beyond just Sinuiju. They also intervened via the Tumen River. The 48th Combined Brigade of the 78th Group Army, based in Tonghua, Jilin Province, crossed into northern Hamgyong Province. Like in Sinuiju, defenses here fell with little resistance, making it seem like a highway for them. This gave us insight into the Chinese military's thinking. If China really wanted to protect Chinese lives and property in North Korea, it would have evacuated them diplomatically instead of intervening militarily. Seeing them recklessly send 2 brigades into North Korea suggests China has another motive. China aimed to influence the east coast near Hamgyong Province. They planned for the 191st Combined Brigade to advance from Sinuiju through Pyongyang to seize the North Korean regime, while the 48th Combined Brigade crossed the Tumen River into Hamgyong Province to secure the east coast. And both were light combined brigades known for their rapid mobility. That's also a major characteristic. In the dim conference room, a large digital map was projected on the wall, highlighting strategic points in the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia with bright lights. All the top figures of the Chinese Ministry of State Security were gathered, their eyes fixed on the map's center. Director of the International Intelligence Bureau of the Ministry of State Security, Hua Chun-hao, he pointed to a spot with his finger. It was the East Sea. His thoughts were clear. The East Sea was no ordinary sea. If China can't control even part of North Korea, this sea will always be closed to it, limiting its future in Asian dominance. Mao Yemin, Director of Northeast Asian Security at the Ministry of State Security, nodded in agreement with his analysis. To move into the Pacific, they needed to breach the United States Navy and Allies' missile defenses, with North Korea being crucial to overcoming that barrier. Hua Chun-hao called this the king of the geopolitical chessboard. If the United States lost this key move, it would suffer an irreparable blow in Asia. If the maritime route through the East Sea opened, China's submarines could advance into the middle of the Pacific Ocean. From there, they could target the United States 7th Fleet Hawaii and eventually the United States mainland. Mao Yemin traced the North-South Korea border on a map and voiced his concerns. If South Korea occupied North Korea, United States troops in Korea would quickly reach the Chinese border. Their focus would shift to Dandong and the Yalu River, turning China's border into a United States military base instead of a safe zone. Hua Chun-hao agreed with this. The intervention aimed for more than just seizing territory. It was a strategic way to keep a buffer zone and give China an advantage in a proxy fight with the United States. At the very least, if they couldn't control the East Coast and some border areas, China's security could not be guaranteed. Mao Yemin repeatedly emphasized the value of the buffer zone. Keeping North Korea as a buffer helped them avoid direct conflict with United States forces in South Korea and increase their bargaining power during Korean Peninsula tensions. The atmosphere in the meeting room grew increasingly tense. Hua Chun-hao reached a conclusion. This intervention was crucial in reducing American influence in Asia and asserting China's dominance. As the United States focused on Taiwan, it was the perfect moment to upset their strategic balance using North Korea. Mao Yemin took it a step further. North Korea's East Coast and Hamgyong Province could become key bases for strengthening China's naval power. Building military bases there would help control Japan and disrupt America's Pacific strategy. It was a key stronghold for resisting the United States-Japan maritime blockade. Finally, Hua Chun-hao declared the Korean Peninsula was now on the chessboard. Secure the East Coast and key areas at all costs. Use the rest as a buffer. There was no need to swallow up all of North Korea. The calculation was that it would be enough to efficiently control only the necessary areas. Mao Yemin nodded, summarizing the goals: secure East Coast access and manage the border buffer zone. Through this, China felt it could dominate Asia and push the United States off this chessboard. When news reached Pyongyang, it was a shock. The Chinese military had officially intervened in the coup. Interestingly, Pyongyang got this news late due to a paralyzed communication network, which took a long time to restore. They missed the golden opportunity. From the start, China consistently stated it did not recognize Kim Ju-wee's regime. This intervention was the direct response. General Guok Chang-sik of the Guard Command was unsure how to proceed. This was his first experience with such a situation, and the first for anyone in this world. General Guok Chang-sik viewed the Chinese military intervention as an act of war and ordered his forces to halt them. They discussed launching nuclear or other missiles at Beijing, but this did not affect the Chinese military. All of North Korea's computers, communications, and electronics were paralyzed. North Korean troops sent to block the Chinese military struggled due to faulty communication equipment. This was because China had been launching cyber attacks against North Korea a week before deploying their troops. Most of North Korea's asymmetric forces are now unusable, including its satellites, which have been rendered powerless. China truly possesses the world's best hacking capabilities. In the 2020s, they hacked Japan's Ministry of Defense and stole all its top secrets. China's weapons resemble America's latest ones mainly due to China's advanced hacking skills. North Korea simply had no choice but to be defeated. Even if they had fought properly from the start, they were destined to lose. Jo Jang-hak-seon kept rallying anti-Guok Chang-sik groups through direct meetings, including some within Pyongyang. General Guok Chang-sik of the Guard Command was furious over China's intervention and harshly condemned their actions. And he even said he was willing to go to war with China. General Guok Chang-sik ordered the 8th Corps in North Pyongan Province to destroy the Yalu River Railway Bridge, but Sinuiju was already under Chinese control. General Guok Chang-sik ordered the 12th Corps in Jagang Province, North Korea, to attack Chinese forces, authorizing an assault. The North Korean army hesitated to fight the Chinese, even though China's military action against North Korea was clearly illegal. Even if our country was unaware, it was an invasion of a sovereign nation. The North Korean army only felt hostility toward the invaders. However, Jo Jang-hak-seon, a pro-Kim Yo-jong faction member not purged by General Guok Chang-sik, had already acted within the military. General Guok Chang-sik made a kill list, the Guok Chang-sik list, and molded the military to his preferences. Consequently, dissatisfaction with General Guok Chang-sik was extremely high. Also, since Kim Yo-jong personally tried to win them over, they couldn't attack the Chinese army recklessly. The military was also questioning Kim Ju-wee's abilities. Because Kim Ju-wee is so young, it was obvious General Guok Chang-sik would take control, making them fear for their lives. And since there were concerns about whether Kim Ju-wee could truly become a leader, there were quite a few in the military who preferred to support the adult Kim Yo-jong instead. As a result, the Chinese military quickly advanced to Pyongyang with little resistance and almost no bloodshed. In that situation, Special Forces training by the United States and South Korea was carried out. They began training under the assumption of real combat. Their training aimed to assassinate Kim Yo-jong. It was a site for decapitation operation drills. In fact, although it was called training, it was actually a place where they ran a mock simulation right before carrying out their mission. The 13th Special Mission Brigade seemed straight out of a movie, silent, sharp, and like a precise, deadly spearhead. The training was intense and showed us their impressive combat abilities. The Special Mission Brigade and the United States Delta Force sometimes conduct airborne training together at nearby training sites, using Special Operations transport aircraft like the Mission Commander, 130, and MH-47 Special Operations helicopters capable of penetrating in bad weather. Now, as a result of continuously introducing and utilizing this kind of equipment, they have been demonstrating skills on par with United States Special Forces. In addition, with the help of the United States, they continued to operate various intelligence and reconnaissance assets here. Their goal was to infiltrate Pyongyang and eliminate key people, weapons, and sites. They were sharpening a keen blade. China's current strategy is to launch the Chick Plan and seize Pyongyang before South Korea does. And after establishing a pro-China regime in North Korea, their goal was to control North Korea as they pleased. Currently, China's 191st Synthetic Brigade has advanced into Sinuiju. Despite poor roads, they advanced quickly toward Pyongyang. The 48th Synthetic Brigade, after crossing the Tumen River, also advanced with little resistance. They aimed to leave Yanbian, pass through Horyong, and reach Pyeongjin and Wonsan. The North Korean army watched helplessly as Chinese forces advanced. Fearing the South Korean army might reach Pyongyang first, China decided to deploy airborne troops. They were China's airborne troops, now assigned to the northern government. It seems that even North Korea was conscious of this, as they possess a large number of airborne light tanks, transport planes, and transport helicopters. Various think tanks analyzed that China's airborne forces were aimed at Taiwan, but in reality, it was North Korea. They also act as a rapid response force. In 1988, riots for independence erupted in Tibet, and within 48 hours, they moved in and suppressed the protests. The distance from their base to Tibet was as much as 3,000 kilometers. China considered deploying its airborne force, but it was difficult for them to capture Pyongyang alone. Although North Korea's military power was weak, its air defense network was still at a certain level, so if the airborne force went in without any support, they would definitely be shot to pieces. The plan was to drop airborne forces near Nampo and Pyongyang once the 191st Combined Brigade of the 79th Group Army neared Pyongyang to coordinate timing. At this time, the airborne force had 3 brigades, the 127th, 128th, and 130th. Special Forces units, including the so-called Nason Assault Unit, were also deployed. China's operation was really getting off to a good start. Meanwhile, in Korea, people were somewhat taken aback by this situation. They did think that the Chinese military might intervene in North Korea's sudden crisis, but they never imagined it would happen this quickly and so soon. This happened partly because South Korea's military intelligence network on North Korea collapsed, forcing all intelligence agencies to focus on restoring their networks there. All other tasks were delayed. Because of this, even though there were ongoing indications that China was planning to intervene in the event of a sudden crisis in North Korea, these issues kept getting pushed aside simply because they were considered a lower priority. They hurriedly convened a state council meeting to come up with countermeasures, but making plans after the fact was like locking the barn door after the horse had already bolted. Still, they had no choice but to come up with a response. Otherwise, they would lose the cow again. In that situation, contact was re-established with Seo-sun of North Korea. Seo-sun's side even told South Korea that they wanted to take advantage of these circumstances. South Korea also insisted Seo-sun do everything possible. The Lee Myung-han administration faced its biggest crisis. The approval rating was low, and people were split into opposing groups. Chinese troop intervention in North Korea became an opportunity for the Lee Myung-han administration. Fewer people now definitely think unification is necessary than before. Unification is unlikely due to its high cost, and if it happens, South Korea would likely lead. These financial burdens would fall on the South Korean government, funded by taxes. It is generally accepted that the estimated cost of unification, calculated by various research institutes, would be at least higher than the amount West Germany spent after the unification of East and West Germany. The economic gap between North and South Korea is too wide. A Stanford University study estimates Korean unification could cost up to 5,850 trillion won. With South Korea's annual budget at 650 trillion, one unification would cost almost 9 times more. Naturally, this would have a negative impact on people's livelihoods. Because of this, many people are opposed to unification. Changing the question slightly can lead to opposite answers. Should we pursue unification? But if you ask, who should get the land if North Korea collapses? You'll get very different answers. Most oppose immediate unification, but believe Korea's territory shouldn't go to China. Anti-China sentiment in South Korea is about 81%, the highest worldwide, with 8 in 10 Koreans disliking China. But when Koreans see China invading what they consider their territory, the Korean peninsula, public sentiment has sharply increased. China was trying to manipulate public opinion using the Woo-ma-ho party, but they couldn't overcome the strong sentiment that China had to be defeated. President Lee Myung-han seized the opportunity in an instant. The approval rating of the Lee Myung-han administration was gradually rising. In this situation, the South Korean government was continuing a cabinet meeting that would determine the future of the entire Korean people. Since President Lee Myung-han's determination was already firm, the cabinet meeting was concluding with the decision to intervene in the sudden crisis in North Korea. The issue was political and diplomatic. South Korea isn't like Israel. It can't just go to war at will. With true determination and courage, North Korea would have become a sea of fire during the 1994 nuclear crisis or the 2010 Cheonan and Yeonpyeong incidents. But that didn't happen. Going to war is a major decision. War is not child's play, and going to war doesn't just bring benefits. The aftermath can be severe, so it's best to avoid war as much as possible. Above all, diplomacy is a very big issue. If you try to advance north while ignoring the opinion of the United States, you will suffer a devastating defeat. Right now, it's not about fighting the North Korean army, but about facing the Chinese army. Also, with the current capabilities of the South Korean military, we can't properly conduct a war without the help of the United States military. Mobilizing and drafting before moving north led to significant gains and losses. With most of South Korea's workforce sent to war, the economy would naturally be paralyzed. Due to this, the opposition party and many civic groups opposed war with China from the start of discussions. However, public opinion shifted, with over 60% insisting we go to war with China. Political issues were naturally being resolved, and even some opposition politicians claimed the Korean Peninsula belongs to us. We had to persuade the United States, but they were very worried about this war. Although President Donald Trump's top priority was to pressure China, his approach was about achieving victory through strong pressure and a trade war, not by winning through military force like this. In a September 2024 podcast with Lex Fridman, President Donald Trump said World War III risk is high and claimed to have a way to avoid war with China this century. Since a full-scale conflict between nuclear powers like China and the United States could easily turn nuclear, they aimed to avoid war. South Korea's determination was stronger than expected, leading to heated secret debates with the United States over the war's direction. In the end, because the opinions of both sides were so different, they couldn't reach a conclusion. South Korea had boosted defense spending and met all United States requests, so they were frustrated and angry about being denied this one thing. Their anger made sense since the Korean Peninsula belonged to South Korea. While these endless and chaotic debates were going on, the Chinese army was slowly advancing. They were quickly marching toward Pyongyang. The South Korean military issued DEFCON 3 to all forces as a precaution. Operational control shifted to the Republic of Korea United States Future Combined Forces Command, and nationwide leave was banned. All base supplies were sorted for transport, storage, or disposal, and everyone was on standby to leave the garrison at any time. Since its founding, the Republic of Korea has raised the alert to Stage 2 only 3 times. The 1976 Panmunjom axe and murder incident events after December 16, 1979 in Seoul, and the 1983 Aung San Mausoleum bombing. With more Chinese troops intervening in the Korean Peninsula, a huge dark cloud now hangs over the region. This was news story. This was news story. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching.